presumably cheering investors. Fewer people would also mean less curation of tweets, which Musk favors, but there are already warnings that this might mean more hacked user information, spam, child porn, and other harmful content. And I need to update stock index futures. For the NASDAQ, they're down more than what I just said, down 1.3%. S&P futures are down 0.8%. In New York, I'm David Brancaccio with the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.
Wayne Hogan of the Terrell Hogan Law Firm.
I'm Wayne Hogan. A company's cell phone policy can protect your employees and your bottom line. Our distracted driving presentation for the workforce can help.
Learn more at waynehogan.law.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect with Melissa Ross. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Opinions expressed on the Friday Media Roundtable are those of our panelists and do not necessarily reflect the views of WJCT News.
I'm going to send him an email. It's the biggest stories from the week. I'm Melissa Ross, and just ahead this hour on First Coast Connect, the week's top stories with our Friday Roundtable as a federal judge orders local officials to redraw their district lines. The city's first couple picks different candidates for sheriff. And the state says Duval Schools is out of compliance with a controversial law. All of that ahead, and then later in the hour, how you can support the Emerald Trail this weekend and get in your steps at the same time. Plus, we've got a ticket giveaway to Beyond Van Gogh, so keep listening for that. It's all ahead after the news.
It's 9:01. You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. I'm Raymond Troncoso. Thanks for joining us. The diamondback terrapin found in Florida's salt marshes and mangrove swamps has become a popular pet in Asia. But overseas demand for the turtle has led to increased poaching. To fight this illegal market, Jessica Mazzaros reports that wildlife advocates want to create a legal breeding program.
The United States Association of Reptile Keepers Florida has asked the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission to consider allowing the legal captive breeding of terrapins in the state. Daniel Parker with U.S. Ark Florida says supplying the trade with captive bred terrapins would discourage illegal collection of wild turtles. The price of terrapins skyrocketed to around $2,600 a piece.
When we start breeding these and putting them into the market, there's no way that turtle that's worth thousands of dollars will continue to be worth that value of money. The price is going to drop, and there's going to be less motive for poachers to go get them out of the wild.
Parker is hoping this issue will be discussed at an FWC meeting on November 30th. I'm Jessica Mazzaros in Tampa.
Sailors and soldiers are used to popping into the USO Welcome Center at Jacksonville International Airport for a little R&R, but they're going to have to find somewhere else to chill while they wait for a flight. The center near the baggage claims has been closed permanently, with a sign on the door apologizing for the inconvenience. The shutdown came as a surprise to USO volunteers at the airport center who helped around 30 service members a day. The USO has not said why the Welcome Center was shuttered, and questions to the nonprofit from WJCT News has gone unanswered. The USO centers at NAS Jax and Mayport Naval Station remain open. For more on this story, go to WJCTnews.org. It's currently in the low to mid-50s in the Jacksonville area. Today it's going to be sunny with a high near 74. This is WJCT News.
A federal judge orders officials to redraw local district lines. The city's first couple picks different candidates for sheriff. And the state says Duval Schools isn't complying with a new law that critics call homophobic. Some of these stories making headlines this week. Good Friday morning. We're live from Studio 5. I'm Melissa Ross, and this is First Coast Connect. Thanks for listening. Just ahead, all of the biggest stories of the week with our Friday Roundtable. You can join us, 549-2937. Then later, how you can support the Emerald Trail this weekend. Get in your steps all at the same time. Plus, we've got a ticket giveaway to Beyond Van Gogh in downtown Jacksonville. Keep listening for that, everybody. All of that ahead, but first this hour, it's Friday, and here to round up all the week's news, we welcome Nate Monroe of the Florida Times-Union on the line. Good morning.
Good morning, Melissa.
And here in studio, Andrew Pentazzi of the Tributary. Hey, Andrew.
Morning.
And also in studio, Claire Heddles of Jacksonville Today.
Hi, Melissa.
Good to have you all. In a moment, we also hope to have regular contributor, former City Council President Jack Webb. And give us a call, folks, as we break down the biggest stories of the week at 549-2937. Let's begin with our top story. The Jacksonville City Council has hired its own attorney after a federal judge ruled that these officials on the council drew city council and school board district maps that are likely racially gerrymandered. In other words, U.S. District Judge Marcia Morales Howard says the council drew the maps in such a way as to dilute black voting power in the city of Jax. The council is appealing this ruling, but they are under the gun to draw new maps by November 8th, which is midterm election day. And the public officials are now saying they don't have enough time to do that. Early voting starts next week, meanwhile. This is our top story, and we want your calls, 549-2937. Emails to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org and tweets to @MelissaInJax. Let's begin with Andrew Pentazzi at the Tributary. You've been covering this extensively. Bring us up to date on these latest developments.
Yeah, so as you said, Judge Marcia Morales Howard issued a court order telling the city council they need to draw new maps, ruling that the old ones that were passed earlier this year were racially gerrymandered, and she set a deadline of November 8th. In court, the city said that's not enough time, that it's too onerous a task to be able to do by that time. Yet, actually at City Council President Terrence Freeman said they will meet that deadline. In fact, they'll meet that deadline and then some, saying they will pass new maps on November 4th. What he's laid out for a timeline is that basically they're going to take 2 weeks off, the City Council, and then have a redistricting consultant draw up a bunch of different variations of maps, and then they'll have meetings on November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd to give feedback on those maps, and then have a special city council meeting on November 4th to vote on the maps. And if it's approved, they would then send those over to the federal court, and the plaintiffs would have the ability to object to the maps and offer their own alternatives.
549-2937. How significant a blow is this? That a federal judge publicly rebuked the city council in this way?
I think it's extremely significant. These types of injunctions are rare. These don't happen every day. These are not easy to prove. And for decades, people have talked about filing suit against the city council over racially gerrymandered districts, but nobody's ever done it. And in many ways, city council members have pointed to the lack of a court order to justify their actions. And now you have a very morally clear court order from Judge Howard that, the law aside, makes clear what city council has been doing for decades is segregating voters on the basis of race and packing black voters into 4 out of 14 council districts. And that's out of 19 council members when you add in the at-large. And that really reduces the black voting power in the city. It confines black voting power to those districts and doesn't allow them to have much of an influence on specifically the other districts on the west side and north side, where there could be a significant black influence on the other 3 districts.
We should note that both African-American Democrats and Republicans on the council, along with white Republicans on the council, are defending the maps. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is not too dissimilar from what we saw last decade with Corinne Brown and the congressional gerrymandering case. Throughout the 2010s, there was a lawsuit that was working its way through. Jacksonville's Congresswoman, Representative Brown, who was one of 3 who were the first black congressional representatives after Reconstruction in Florida. She was fighting that lawsuit, even though the lawsuit was backed by civil rights groups, which sought to change her district. And it changed it from a much more a higher black percentage but less compact district to a more compact one that stretched from Jacksonville to Tallahassee and Gadsden County. The result of that lawsuit that Corinne Brown was on the wrong side of was there was a new district made in Orlando that Val Demings won, and that allowed black voters to have more influence. And that's kind of what we're seeing here, where there's sometimes it's self-interest on the part of lawmakers, regardless of party, regardless of race. And sometimes it's laziness, I think, not being willing to do the hard work. And sometimes it's fear of, hey, I'll just keep what's been in place for decades and I don't want to mess anything up. So I'm gonna hold firm to what's been around for a long time. And specifically what I found in my reporting, I did a deep dive into archives, into old city council records, and that this has been going on, these specific types of districts, since 1991. And that since 91, we've seen these really tortured snake-like shapes going through the north side and west side to pick up as many black voters as possible into 4 districts. And the result of that, as I said, as Judge Howard ruled, is that it really reduces black voting power and it hurts them overall on a 19-member city council.
5492937. Nate Monroe, as you noted in the Times-Union this week, some of the council members actually said, I guess the quiet part out loud, that they were drawing the lines this way to preserve their own seats on the council.
Correct. As Andrew alluded to, a lot of what is behind this is just pure self-interest. The council was explicit and really shockingly explicit in a way that I think people would be fairly surprised that they were interested in protecting incumbents. That was a top priority in this map-making process, that they wanted to protect incumbents. This is the kind of thing that a politician in a different city might be ashamed to admit out loud. And I think as a practical matter, what happened was that they segregated voters by race based on what the incumbents perceived was most favorable to them. And so the dynamic that you saw play out in the map-making process was, white conservative council members in districts that were adjacent to majority black districts were okay with stripping their majority white districts with surgical precision of, basically every black voter, and packing all of those black voters into the existing 4 districts. And the representatives of those existing 4 districts were happy to take those black voters and bolster their own standing in those 4 districts. Mm-hmm. So, incumbency and race became this kind of inseparable issue in the redistricting process. And this is where you get this kind of bipartisan rot within the city council, that a lot of this was driven by self-interest. It's just really plain and simple.
It was interesting to note Claire Heddles of Jacksonville Today, Councilmember Matt Carlucci, a white Republican, the only member of this body, saying that he disagreed with the decision to appeal the judge's ruling. Probably not going to make him a lot of friends on the council, but he said he thinks they should think about what's right for the citizens of Jacksonville.
And the public wasn't invited to that discussion about their decision to appeal. That was a closed-door meeting with the attorney, and so, the public didn't get to hear what they discussed, how they came to the decision to appeal. But really what we've seen from pretty much all of the council, maybe save Matt Carlucci, is digging their heels in for these maps, even though hundreds of people criticized them last spring. And I think that's one of the most striking things, is that the judge is really, uplifting what people criticized the maps for last spring, and we're seeing council still dig their heels in again, which is how they responded to the public 6 months ago when they brought these criticisms forth.
It's not surprising people would defend their work product, Andrew, but strategically, is this a smart move for these officials to be making?
I think it's honestly kind of bizarre at this point in the process, where they've been smacked down so thoroughly by Judge Howard, that they are not expressing, it seems, more of an interest in saying, hey, can we reach a deal with the plaintiffs, especially because for your listeners, this is an injunction. This was which is even harder to prove than going to trial. But there's still a trial scheduled for next year. And if the city is continuing to defend its original map and it goes to trial, who knows what comes out in deposition? Because what can come out in deposition, one of the things we saw play out in the first round of redistricting was they would have these meetings, member-to-member meetings. That they basically segregated the redistricting, and the north side and west side redistricted on its own. And when they would have these meetings, the planning director who was drawing the maps, Bill Killingsworth, would be like, I've met with each of you individually, and you've told me what you want. Well, we don't know what they told him at those meetings. That could come out in depositions and discovery, and there's a lot more potentially embarrassing or damaging things that could come out if this goes to a full trial. But City Council is saying full steam ahead. We're gonna fight this, and also we're gonna fight this in a really interesting way. We're going to hire Governor DeSantis's, the same lawyer defending Governor DeSantis's congressional maps. In 2 lawsuits.
Which also removed or diluted minority access.
Yeah, so that's
power.
related to Jacksonville's congressional district that was dismantled. So,
And at the appellate level, there's a chance the city council could win, right? It's a more conservative bank of judges since Governor DeSantis has been elected.
I mean, there's always a chance they could win. I would be a little bit skeptical of what argument they're going to have that would be persuasive, even to a conservative judiciary, because I don't think this issue does not break down as neatly as some other redistricting issues along liberal conservative lines. I think the issue of, is it okay that they were sorting Jacksonville residents on the basis of race without having a compelling interest to do it, without trying to advance equity or access, but instead just doing it because they wanted to? That's not something that conservatives or liberals, when it comes to judiciary, I think are going to be very favorable to.
Judge Howard also, we should point out, appointed by a Republican.
Yeah, George W. Bush appointed Judge Howard in 2007.
All right, 549-2937. Give us a call, folks. Eugene on the north side. Hi, Eugene. Good morning.
Hey, and good morning to all. Quick question, and I'll take my response your response off the line. Quick question in regards to the good morning again.
Yeah, go ahead, Gene.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, please go ahead.
My question is, now that we're delving into this issue about the council positions, do we need to reconsider or send all of the, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Do we need to reconsider all of the at-large council seats with the issues of gerrymandering? Should all of those seats be put back on the ballot because perhaps some stuff was missing in the voting process?
Thanks, Eugene. You know, Nate Monroe, there are 19 people on this city council. Yes, we have a huge land mass and it's a big city, but through the years, a lot of people have commented on whether we need these at-large council members. And the at-large seats further dilute the voting power of African-American voters, too.
They do. Unquestionably, they do. You can look at, I think that the council president himself is a very good example of this dynamic. He was appointed a few years ago to the city council by former Governor Rick Scott to fill out the term of a suspended council member who had been indicted on some federal fraud charges. He was appointed to District 10, which is a majority black district. Freeman is black and is a Republican, and his appointment to that district was met with very swift pushback from the community. And when it was time for him to need to campaign if he wanted to hold that seat, he bailed on District 10. It was pretty clear he would not be able to win an election in District 10. And so he ran citywide for an at-large seat. He ran against a white Democrat, and he won despite losing the black vote overwhelmingly. This is what plays out in city elections all the time. You know, more than 70% of the time, the candidate that black voters prefer is blocked by the candidate that white voters prefer. This is racially polarized voting. This is a phenomenon that occurs here with regularity. And this is something that is, really at the core of the court case. These at-large seats are not something that Judge Howard is looking at, but they are definitely, and particularly in light of this lawsuit, I think fair game for people to re-examine and to kind of question why do we need 5 at-large seats? You know, I've always been sort of skeptical of them.
5492937. Bill in Avondale. Hi, Bill. Go ahead.
There's something here I just don't get. If the council districts are made...
Okay, we lost you here, but what he wanted to ask is if the council districts are made more compact, does that reduce voting power, was his question. Claire Heddles, you know, the whole notion of gerrymander districts is that they are not compact and contiguous, which is the standard.
Right, compact is one of the requirements of the city's charter, is that these voting districts are compact. So it's not necessarily that having compact districts would make them more or less reduce voting power for a specific group, but that is one of the mandates of the city's charter that Judge Howard pointed to as one of the issues with the map, as well as the federally protected right for access to vote and equal access to vote. And then, so it's not necessarily that compact districts will protect access, but that is one of the issues that the council didn't follow.
Here's an email about that from a listener. It's amazing to see the same people having opposite views at the same time with a straight face. They are against the city maps for not being compact enough, and at the same time, they are against the state congressional district maps that were made more compact. All right, let's talk about that. Andrew Pantazzi.
Well, I think first it's important. People seem to forget what the map was that Governor DeSantis vetoed. Governor DeSantis vetoed a district that was wholly in Jacksonville, did not leave the city lines, it was not the Jacksonville to Tallahassee district that he vetoed. He vetoed a very compact district that was solely in Duval County. Now we have no congressional district solely in Duval County.
Right. The legislature drew more compact maps that also preserved black representation.
Correct.
The governor vetoed that.
Yes. And his argument was it wasn't compact enough because it made the other district, Congressman Rutherford's district, have to kind of go around it. But the other issue here is that what we're dealing with are kind of opposite sides of the same coin, which is dilution versus packing. And with the congressional maps that did pass, we saw adding in to Duval, Clay and Nassau in one district and St. John's in the other district, which made sure that both districts did not have a significant enough black population. You could have done it many different ways and had much more compact maps. One of the maps that was discussed was a Nassau and Duval only map, which would have been very competitive, about 50-50, but that wouldn't have been as dilutive. Instead, this was kind of the most dilutive you could have done, which is Duval, Clay, and Nassau for the West Side, North Side district. Over on City Council, you've got the opposite problem, where they're putting in too many black residents without having a good basis or reason to do so, which then reduces black voting power in the other districts.
Linnell and Mandarin on the line. Hi, Linnell. What are your thoughts?
Hey, good morning. Thank you for taking my call. I just wanted to add something to this. And when we're talking about the candidates that get selected by the predominantly, white preferred population, I think it's really sad in a time where we're facing gerrymandering of our city council maps as well as that of our congressional maps, especially Congressional District 5 here in Jacksonville. You had an organization that held a candidates forum last night called the Collective Voices. They represent 25 Black-led, Black-focused organizations here in Jacksonville. And we saw a certain particular type of candidates who did not even show up to answer questions on behalf of the Black community. I mean, this happened in October 2020 when they held an online forum. So it would have cost those candidates nothing to participate in these forums. They didn't have to travel anywhere. It was virtual. They're very professionally done. But you have candidates who aren't even willing to listen to the Black community, nor are they willing to show up for these forums for the Black community either. And I just think that's pretty sad. Thank you.
Thank you, Linnell. Nate Monroe, I think that's why this ruling from the judge has reverberated so strongly, because of the perception that our local officials, and hey, might as well say also our state officials, don't listen to the will of the voters, aren't responsive to their constituents on some of these issues.
Sure. I mean, I think a different way of saying it, and I think this explains why the council is kind of struggling to respond to this, is that, City Hall is not used to consequences. Council members are not used to like real accountability for some of the outrageous things that they do. And when they are held accountable very publicly by a federal judge, it's caused them. I mean, we can see a lot of cognitive dissonance here. It's, the way we opened this conversation was talking about how this kind of sleight of hand that the city is playing by telling the judge on the one hand, we don't have time to make maps, and on the other, well, we'll definitely make the maps. We definitely have time. I mean, it's just this kind of an odd thing, and I think that, this kind of complacency explains a lot of that. That these are folks who are in safe districts that have been drawn to specifically to protect their personal interests, and why would they need to attend forums that they're not interested in?
Yeah, I mean,
they're running in districts that were tailor-made for them at their own preference. Like, they got to go through on a micro level and toss in roads that they wanted and toss out neighborhoods they didn't want.
Josh tweets the show, when it comes to gerrymandering, the research is clear. You need independent redistricting commissions. In other words, public officials shouldn't be allowed to draw their own district lines. It'd be like, I've said this before on the show, Claire, it'd be like me saying, well, these are my ratings for the month. They're whatever I say they are. So give me a raise. I mean, it doesn't work that way for most people. Most people have independent accountability and independent standards they need to meet in their jobs.
And the council members were fairly forthright in the fact that they were acting in protecting their own interest and their own incumbency.
Okay, let's take a couple more calls, then we'll move on. Linda in Mandarin. Hi, Linda.
Good morning. I think one of the most, not amazing because this is an environment we're in, but now they have outside counsel when Brenda Priestley Jackson, who's an attorney, Rory Diamond was a former prosecutor, so they're attorneys. Now, they may not have specialization in this type of law, but I'm sure they had input from some type of city attorney that said, you're fine. So all these attorneys, regardless of the other city council members, didn't know what they were doing was illegal. And then they have the audacity to want to file an appeal. Where's their pockets? They need to have malpractice insurance for government officials because they're using our money to appeal doing something that's wrong because they want to get reelected. They don't care about what the people need or want to grow this city. It's really foul. Thank you.
Thank you. Shamari on the northwest side. Hi, Shamari. You're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi. Yeah. So my question is, what about the inverse effect of compacting these minority access districts? As a Black Republican, if you're in a district where the overwhelming majority is African Americans who are Democrats, but you're an African American Republican, is your voice going to be heard? If you want to run for office in a district where there are 24,000 voters and 16,000 of them are Democrats, do you have a chance at winning? So what about the other perspective on this issue?
Thanks, Shamari. Andrew.
So this is a really great point to bring up and to explain for your listeners. This is why you can't just use race arbitrarily when you're doing redistricting. You have to use it in a narrowly tailored way for a compelling government interest. And proving that, what the courts have laid out is that you've got to show, as Nate talked about, racially polarized voting. In Jacksonville, they do break down along party lines. Black voters in Jacksonville overwhelmingly favor Democratic candidates. Even when it's a Black Republican versus a white Democrat, Black voters overwhelmingly favor the white Democrat. And we see this play out again and again with the data you can get from a precinct level. And because of that, that doesn't mean 100%. That doesn't mean every Black voter is a Democrat, but it does mean that if you're a Black Republican, like you're not part of the majority of your racial group, how they are voting. And so that does mean if you're in this, it's not they can't really draw a district for Black Republicans because there's not enough of them. But we do see in Jacksonville, we actually have some backstops that have historically allowed for a large amount of black Republican representation. And that's been the at-large residency requirements. Because we have at-large elections, which have residency requirements, so you have to live in certain parts of the city. We've seen in one district, Glorious Johnson and Sam Newby, and even before them, I'm blanking now on the spot, but there was also the woman in the 90s who was elected there, all of whom are Republican, all of whom are black. And then now we have Terrence Freeman as well at large. And so there has been that ability for that specific representation. But when it comes to these districts, if you're actually using race and taking it into account, you have to do it in as narrow a way as possible.
If you're just tuning in, it's our Friday Media Roundtable with Andrew Pantazzi, Nate Monroe, Claire Heddles, and me as we talk about the biggest stories from the week. Lots of calls on this, but we do need to move on and touch on some other headlines. And you can join us at 549-2937. Also catching some attention this week, did you see this? Jacksonville's first couple decided to endorse different candidates in the upcoming November special election for sheriff. Mayor Lenny Curry, not surprisingly, is supporting the Republican in the race, T.K. Waters. But his wife, Molly Curry, endorsed the Democrat, Lakeisha Burton. Now, Burton has received some support around town from other prominent Republicans, like former Jaguars owner Wayne Weaver and major Republican donor Gary Chartrand, who used to be the head of the Florida School Board of Education. Waters, meanwhile, is expected to announce another major endorsement Monday, just as early voting begins. Let us know who'll get your vote for sheriff, folks. Will it be T.K. Waters or Lakeisha Burton? Give us a call, 549-2937. Nate Monroe, how significant is it to see the mayor's wife break ranks and support the Democrat for sheriff?
On a practical level, I am skeptical in the extreme that it is significant at all. I would also say that I don't find the mayor's endorsement to be a very meaningful thing at this point either. The endorsements that matter, as you referenced, are the people who give you money. Gary Chartrand, Ed Burr, Wayne Weaver. That's the kind of support that if you're a candidate, particularly a Democratic candidate in a citywide race, that you would really depend on to win. And that is indeed what Lakeisha Burton is depending on in large part to win. I think what the kind of dueling endorsements speak to is that kind of unusual division among the syndicate, the donor class between these two candidates. I don't forget too the Jack's Chamber endorsed both candidates, which is very unusual.
Very unusual, yeah.
Yeah, and that speaks to I've had a lot of conversations with donor types and folks who are in rooms when these decisions are being made, and I think that there is kind of a mix of things going on. There are people who have long-standing relationships with Lakeisha Burton. There are people, of course, who also just support Republicans. But there is also, there is a recognition that the status quo has not been great. And you are seeing in some of these donor circles some reluctance to get behind, what would be, in effect, a third term of Mike Williams or a, fifth or sixth term of John Rutherford. This is what T.K. Waters essentially represents. At the same time, I think that some of these same folks are also not as warmed up to Lakeisha Burton as they would like to be. And so you are kind of seeing this weird, almost kind of stalemate in some sense. So it's definitely it's an interesting race. It's a very different kind of citywide race than we're used to seeing here.
549-2937. Claire Heddles, the candidates will be appearing today, I believe, at the First Coast Tiger Bay Club. Our own Dan Scanlon, newly hired at WJCT News, will be covering their what's likely to be their final debate or appearance before the election. Early voting starts next week, and more endorsements could be coming.
Yeah, I think one thing the endorsement shows us partly is the moderacy of Lakeisha Burton a little bit. Really, her positions aren't that far against the status quo. The two things that they really divide on are expanding the the citation program from juveniles to include adults, which is something that Mike Williams formerly endorsed and then didn't carry through. It's something that the state attorney is also supportive, so that's not really a controversial position. And then the other thing that they're really, separate on is bringing in FDLE for police shootings, which now Mike Williams is in FDLE. So I think in a lot of ways their positions aren't that dissimilar, other than these sort of 2 points. And I think seeing some of these prominent Republicans endorse Burton is demonstrative of that.
Yeah, I think,
Andrew, yeah.
I think what's interesting is if you had asked many people before either candidate had announced, 2 years ago, asked the rank and file at JSO or asked people who knew them, what do you think of Lakeisha Burton? What do you think of TK Waters? I think a lot of people would have had favorable opinions about both of them. I think this is where you're seeing partisanship not necessarily representing how a lot of people are thinking in this election. I mean, Lakeisha Burton's background included the Police Athletic League, close ties with the police union, and TK Waters has been at the forefront of a lot of initiatives and issues, which has included the gang violence initiative, as well as whenever there's a police shooting, he's often been the spokesperson for JSO, the chief out there talking to the media, and so he's been in front of the cameras. And so I think what you're seeing is a really interesting breakdown when, I agree with Nate. I don't think it matters to voters, the fact that the mayor's endorsed someone and the mayor's wife has endorsed someone else. But I do think it says something about this election and how difficult it has been to judge the candidates and what they are going to do and how much of it has relied on personal relationships. Both of them know a lot of prominent people in the community personally, and I think that that's showing in some of the bipartisanship, at least on Lakeisha Burton's side, of some prominent Republicans who've been supporting her. I mean, the Police Athletic League is obviously a prominent and involved in a lot of nonprofit discussions as well.
5492937, Josh at the Beaches. Hey, Josh, go ahead. You're on the air.
Hi there. Yeah, I am new to the area, and one thing that I'm concerned about, particularly with JSO, is corruption and the use of force. Sheriffs that seem to think it's okay to just beat people up and arrest them for no reason, and they do get away with it. And the question I have is, which of the candidates for sheriff even has that on their radar? And is this a problem that people in general are sort of aware of?
Yeah.
I'll take my answer offline.
Thank you, Josh. When it comes to the issue of police reform, Nate, that has come up at the forums and debates these candidates have participated in, including the one we held here at WJCT. The change mantle, I think, the reform mantle is falling more on Burton than Waters when it comes to those kinds of issues and suspicion of police, concerns about police accountability.
I think that's right. I also do agree with Claire, who sort of referenced this idea that we're really kind of debating around the margins on a lot of ideas. We could spend obviously an entire show on, police brutality and corruption. And I mean, the fact of the matter is, in a broad sense, state law really limits what these sheriffs can do in terms of kind of opening up or making more transparent, the process of investigating police shootings. Whether FDLE does it or whether the JSO and the state attorney's office does it, I mean, that's really a kind of a question on the margins. FDLE handles police shooting investigations for a lot of police departments in Florida, and the outcomes in those investigations are not necessarily any different or any better than the conclusions that you'd see from, the state attorney and JSO. It's just that these sheriffs are kind of simultaneously a power with a lot of position and also a position with a lot of power, but a position that's also really, hemmed in by state law and by these collective bargaining agreements of police unions. So, on substance, I mean, police reform is something that would be very difficult to achieve, and I don't think either candidate in the race is really talking about something that would be transformative in the police department.
Claire.
And specifically to that caller's comment about police misconduct, neither candidate supports bringing in a civilian review board to evaluate police misconduct cases. The one candidate that was in the race that did support that is,
he did not make the
didn't
runoff.
make it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
By the way, you will have the chance to vote November 8th for sheriff, for governor, in the Senate race between incumbent Marco Rubio and his challenger Val Demings. Early voting starting next week, folks, so get out and vote whoever you choose. Let's talk for a few minutes now about another story from the week. The Florida State Board of Education says Duval County Public Schools is one of 11 districts around Florida that hasn't complied with new state laws, including a controversial new measure, the Parental Rights in Education law, that critics have been calling for some time now the Don't Say Gay law. Now, the state says Duval is out of compliance, even though the district has done a lot of things. They've taken down their LGBTQ plus support guide. That caused consternation among some parents, teachers, and students who said it was important. They directed teachers to remove all In for Safe Schools signs from their classrooms. They've rebranded certain student support resources so that they are no longer tailored for gay or transgender students. They temporarily discontinued supplemental sex ed materials in all grade levels. Give us a call as we talk about this, 549-2937. Claire Heddle says, you report at Jax today. The state is telling Duval County and 10 other Florida school districts to further change policies in the next 2 months. What would that look like?
Right, so the State Board of Education met for 2 days this week, and they both revealed the results of this survey of 31 districts of how well they're complying with new support guidance from the state that's specifically in the Parental Rights in Education law. And the State Board also passed sweeping new policies about ways to enforce it. And in their conclusion from their survey results, they said that 11 of the 31 districts they surveyed have not followed the law correctly. 5 of those, they say, didn't change their policies, and 6 of them, they said, changed their policies, but their policies still aren't in line with the law. And Duval is one of those that changed their policies. And now the State Board is saying by the end of the year, they're expecting school districts to come into compliance. We reached out to both the State Department of Education and to the school district to find out what specific policy the state is pointing to as what Duval is doing wrong, and they haven't responded yet, so we're hoping to learn that later today. But it is, I think for Duval, they have taken a pretty strong stance in rescinding a lot of the protections that were in place, unlike some other school districts like Alachua or Broward, who have stood up for LGBTQ students more so in response to the law. But even still, the state is saying you're not in compliance even after removing the support guide, even after taking down All In for Safe Schools and rebranding it as All In for All Students. So I think, there's a lot of questions about students' federal rights and how they're going to be protected and moving forward.
549-2937. Andrew Pentazzi, we should note, Equality Florida has sued the state over the Parental Rights in Education law, saying students and parents' First Amendment rights are being violated, that students have a right under federal law to use facilities like locker rooms and restrooms that align with their gender identity.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting changes that the Board of Education, the Department of Education is doing is almost using the regulatory hurdles to make it more difficult. So this requirement that school districts send letters to every parent notifying them if they have any restrooms that are not strictly segregated on the basis of gender. That's obviously another hurdle to make it, I think, more difficult for some school districts, and it just adds more mechanisms where the Department of Education is able to potentially punish because, hey, you didn't send a letter to this parent. It creates more regulatory compliance issues, I think, for the school districts without strictly prohibiting the action. And so, yeah, Equality Florida was saying it's still allowed. Students can still use the restroom identified with their gender. But yeah, I think what we're seeing from the Department of Education is kind of this wholesale, still broadside. And it's interesting the update that Claire gave, which is they did a survey and they published this, and it's this like short thing that just says, we took a cursory glance at your policies and they appear to be out of compliance. No further comment, just just so you know, they appear to be out of compliance. We're not going to tell you how. Why do that now versus wait until you've done more than a cursory glance and actually examined and determined whether it's out of compliance or not? Just seems like another way of trying to keep school districts scared and afraid of what Tallahassee will bring. And that's been the kind of the theme of the last year when it comes to school policy. The last couple of years has been Tallahassee wants local school districts that are closer to families, parents, and schools to be afraid of what the larger government agency from Tallahassee is going to do and going to crack down on.
The Florida law could be a model for a national law, too. We need to point out Republicans in the U.S. House of Representatives have introduced legislation that critics are describing as a national don't say gay bill. If this bill were to become law, not likely in the current Congress, but potentially at some point could become law, NPR reporting the effects could be far more sweeping, affecting not just instruction in schools, but events and literature at any federally funded institution. Nate Monroe, this bill is called the Stop the Sexualization of Children Act. It lumps together topics of sexual orientation and gender identity with sexual content. It complains that some school districts have implemented sex ed programming for kids under 10. By the way, that hasn't been done in Florida. It follows Republican-driven parental rights measures in Florida and elsewhere. Critics of this move by Republicans in the Congress say that it could have devastating consequences for LGBTQ plus Americans to live their lives openly and honestly. They call it an attempt to stigmatize and marginalize their community. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, as we've seen on the state level here, and this is something Andrew was alluding to, this confusion over the law and how to comply with the law is deliberate. This was built into the Don't Say Gay bill, this ambiguity. This is something that critics were concerned about from the beginning, that this exact issue would arise, which is, what exactly are we prohibiting? What exactly is allowed? This kind of arbitrary enforcement of the law. These are things that repressive governments weaponize all the time. You use confusion around a very broad law to control behavior. This is why laws in this country are supposed to be specific. Because you can weaponize this ambiguity. And this is what we're seeing in Florida. This is why, I suspect a large reason why Duval's struggling with complying with the law is they're not being told what they're out of compliance with. So what do? You overcompensate. There are really insidious effects from bills like this. And it is dangerous, and it's un-American in its structure and its effects.
All right, folks, almost out of time, but let's go around the horn and see what might have missed our attention this week in the news. Yes, it's our lightning round, everybody. We'll start with Claire Heddles. What's on your mind?
Well, early voting starts Tuesday. We've been hammering it home, but we have voter guides at jackstoday.org/vote. I did one about judges this week
and nobody knows about judges, so that's so helpful.
Go read about the judges.
Yeah. jackstoday.org/vote. Check it out. Andrew Pantazzi.
Well, I think you may already have this on the schedule, but the Emerald Trail Run, really excited for people to bike or run the Emerald Trail tomorrow, is it?
Yeah.
So
they're up next, by the way.
Perfect.
Yeah, we'll be telling folks about that and some other things, too. Nate Monroe, what's going on in your world?
Well, the Cumberland Island National Seashore turns 50 on Sunday, and my colleague Mark Woods is a really, really nice column about that. He's definitely our resident parks expert, so I'd recommend people check that out. It's a little bit more of a uplifting topic than what we've been talking about this morning.
That's great. And by the way, if you've never been to Cumberland Island, folks, you owe it to yourself to go. You can only get there on the ferry boat. Do it. You will be amazed at its beauty and the wild horses, and it's really special. And let me plug my stuff. Today at noon, our statewide live call-in show, the Florida Roundup, takes a look at controversial arrests around the state for alleged voter fraud. People rounded up and arrested for voting. They had no idea they broke any law. We'll look at the home stretch of this campaign cycle and Hurricane Ian's impact on Florida's agricultural sector. And then tomorrow at 4 p.m., make sure to tune in to What's Health Got to Do with It, hosted by Mayo Clinic's own Dr. Joe Servant. He's going to explore healthcare at 30,000 feet in the air. That sounds interesting, too. So listen for that on Saturday after you check out that Emerald Trail 5K. And we're going to have details on that in just a bit, along with a cool ticket giveaway. But I want to thank our panel. Thank you so much, Andrew Pantazzi of The Tributary, Nate Monroe of the Florida Times-Union, and Claire Heddles of Jax Today. Former City Council President Jack Webb, it turns out, had a family emergency, but we'll catch him next time. Thanks, guys, and have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
Thanks, all. Coming up, a big ticket giveaway, yes, to Beyond Van Gogh Jacksonville, so keep listening for details. Also, we'll preview this weekend's Emerald Trail 5 and 10K, how you can support the Emerald Trail and get in your steps at the same time. Don't go away.
This week on Science Friday, exploring the hilarious world of depression, what humor can help us understand about living with depression, and what science can't always explain.
I wish there was one thing that worked for everybody. I wish there was like an antibiotic, a penicillin of mental health.
That's on Science Friday from WNYC Studios.
This afternoon at 3 here on WJCT News 89.9.
Millions apply for student loan forgiveness, but will the Supreme Court block the program? Also, new records are set for early voting ahead of the midterms, and actress and Hollywood icon Anna May Wong makes history, becoming the first Asian American featured on U.S. currency. All of that and more on the Friday News Roundup, next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Good news, folks. We've got a fabulous ticket giveaway right now. Thanks to our good pals at Be Friends Farm, we have a pair of tickets to give away to tonight's showing of Beyond Van Gogh Jacksonville. It's billed as an immersive experience, and I got to go last week. Let me tell you, if you haven't seen this amazing exhibition yet, now is your chance to score a pair of tickets. Here's how. If you'd like a pair of tickets to catch Beyond Van Gogh tonight at 8 o'clock in downtown Jacksonville, just drop us an email right now. Send it to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org and just put Van Gogh in the subject line. We're going to pick one winner at random, and you can pick up your tickets this afternoon here at WJCT. Thanks so much to Be Friends Farm for this generous ticket donation. Well, finally this hour, are you looking for something to do outdoors in the gorgeous fall weather this weekend? Well, you're in luck because the third annual ViStar Emerald Trail 5 and 10K Run, Walk, and Ride is happening tomorrow, and there is still time to register. We've got a preview with Kay Ahas, CEO at Groundwork Jax. Good morning.
Good morning, Melissa.
And Dana Karzan, Chief Marketing Officer at ViStar Credit Union.
Good morning.
Thank you both, ladies, for being here. Dana, in a moment, we'll talk about why ViStar is generously supporting this event. But first, Kay, tell us about the 5K and how it supports your vision for the Emerald Trail.
Well, it helps us start activating the Emerald Trail even before it's fully built. We're excited that part of it's going to be on the upcoming La Villa Link, which is going to be fully finished by the end of March. So not totally. So the pretty stuff's not there yet, and it's not all done. But it enables us to go from a 5K to add a 10K. So our goal, I want to rival the Gate River Run one day. It's going to be 30 miles. We could have a marathon.
Yeah, because eventually the idea is a green belt that will go all the way around the city through every neighborhood.
Absolutely.
That you
Absolutely.
can walk and bike, that has native plants and that's beautiful and bucolic, even through city neighborhoods. That's the vision.
And a 30-mile art gallery as well.
Yeah.
Think about that.
It's such a great thing. Now, people can come out for this and register even as late as tomorrow morning, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it supports our ability to do our work.
Okay, let's talk to Dana Karzan now, Chief Marketing Officer at ViStar. Why has ViStar decided to champion the Emerald Trail?
Well, as you know, at ViStar, we really focus on improving the communities that we serve. And there's not a much better example than the Emerald Trail and the vision of the Emerald Trail. It's about connecting all of the very unique neighborhoods in Jacksonville, and also letting us really appreciate the beautiful nature that we have as a gift in Jacksonville, and pulling it all together so we can connect as neighbors and residents. And then the other piece of it, which is incredibly exciting, is it's going to be something that's going to be an attraction. That's going to be something to really help us show off our wonderful city to visitors alike.
Yeah.
So at ViStar, it's just very important that we can support those types of opportunities that our community has.
When it's fully built, the Emerald Trail will be a 30-mile urban trail and linear park system. It will connect 14 historic neighborhoods to downtown, the St. Johns River, McCoy Creek, and Hogan's Creek. It is going to be a transformative new landmark for the city of Jacksonville. Now, at the event, Dana, this weekend, there's a 5K, a 10K, pre- and post-race festivities, lots of fun, even some swag from you guys. There's lots happening, right?
Absolutely. So it's going to kick off at the Duval County Courthouse. We're going to have fun activities at the beginning, fun family activities. Come with your family. Serious athletes have the opportunity to do a really great, as much as a 10K or a 5K. Those that just want to walk or bike also have the opportunity to bring their families, enjoy getting together with your neighbors and friends in Jacksonville, and then getting a first glimpse of what will be the first segment of our Emerald Trail.
You know, Kay, I've had the opportunity to walk and bike the section that is already complete. And it's really just an amazing experience to get on your bike and whiz through all of these neighborhoods under a bower of trees.
Yeah.
Looking at native plants that have been built all along the way, planted all along the way. As you said, there will be art on the trail. And the way that it's going to link neighborhoods together as well. You'll be able to go from one neighborhood to another by walking or biking.
Yeah. And what's really cool about it is that each neighborhood has their own kind of loop if they only want to do their neighborhood. But it's a series of links that will connect all these neighborhoods. Wealthier neighborhoods with less well-to-do neighborhoods, which I love that. The social connections it'll bring, and the fact that people will be able to see historic African-American neighborhoods that they don't typically get to see, and to see how wonderful they really are.
Yeah, I was able to take the trail through Durkeeville on my bike, and I really recommend that because it's a historic neighborhood that a lot of people listening to this right now, maybe you've never been through it, and you should. Check it out.
Durkeeville Historical Society is going to have a booth at the race this year.
Nice. So with all of that said, folks, it's the third annual ViStar Emerald Trail 5 and 10K Run, Walk, and Ride tomorrow. Assemble downtown at the Duval County Courthouse. The bike ride begins at 4. The run and walk begins at 5. You can register right now at firstplacesports.com, or tomorrow you can register on site. And I just know we're going to have great weather. Isn't the weather great?
Awesome.
It's going to be
awesome.
perfect. Yes.
Oh,
perfect.
it's perfect for this. So have fun, ladies. Kay Ahas, CEO at Groundwork Jacksonville. Dana Karzan, Chief Marketing Officer at ViStar Credit Union. You can support the Emerald Trail Saturday. Get in your 10,000 steps at the same time if you don't want to do the run. So have fun, and thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, everyone, and thanks to our team, David Luck and Heather Schatz, Isabella De Silva, Michelle Corum, and our intern, Gary Autry. I'll be back today at noon with my co-host, Matthew Petty. for the Florida Roundup, our live statewide call-in show rounding up the biggest stories across Florida this week. That's today at noon. Talk to you then. Have a great weekend.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TP